was brought up in a house where I was told anything was possible. There wasn't as much of a standard of you've got to get, straight A's and you've got to do this, but as much as this feeling of empowerment. And so I feel very fortunate to have had that freedom to be able to pursue, my success. I definitely do think growing up with this feeling of limitlessness really has impacted my understanding of what success is.
You're going to be amazed today. Crowdfunding, how to do it, what works, how Sarah raised $140 million in crowdfunding. 19,000 investors. Great story, amazing lesson.
You have to care about what you do. So if you don't care about what you do, no one else is going to either, and you're not going to have that feeling of success. The hardest step I've ever gone through, it makes the success and the feeling of success even greater.
Building your tribe, brand ambassadors, the 80-20 rule and how it applies to your business. Let's go with Sarah Hardwick. So Sarah, what's your definition of success?
At the end of the day, I believe that for me, success is actually a feeling. I think that you can't be successful unless you feel successful. And so for me, the only way that I really have found that I can do that is by aligning with my personal meaning and purpose. So I think for me, that meaning and purpose comes from my values. So getting honest with what that is, what my meaning and purpose is, has really been for me the key to success. And I think what's been kind of surprising for me to understand over my career is that it's not always about making money.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny how over our period of time that changes. So with your self-exploration, then finding your meaning, finding your purpose, that I guess that makes you feel successful more because you know where you're headed. Is that, am I understanding that right?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess it's, really because it's having gone through some experiences of having those really big wins. For example, I had an amazing experience. I actually sold a domain for $1 million in 24 hours. And that was like one of the most, kind of financially amazing, successful things that had ever happened to me. And that was amazing, but the feeling was fleeting. So for me, I think especially when it's more transactional, even with those big wins, that feeling of success can be fleeting. So for me, understanding kind of what my meaning and purpose is, and then aligning that with my work is important. So for me, I think that means changing the world, making it a better place for my son Elliot, who's 10, being a role model for him. So those are the types of things that I think make me feel successful. So weaving those into my business and my work and my passion is how I can continually keep that feeling of success alive.
All right, I got to ask then, you said it a few times. How did you, Sarah, find your meaning? What led to that? Was there a journey? Was there an aha moment? How did that come about?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. So I started my company as an entrepreneur when I was 25, and it was a marketing agency called Zenzi. And I ran that business for a decade. And, we had great clients. We had Nestle and Chiquita and Crystal Geyser. And but over after the first 10 years, it just started to become a grind. And it just, even though, I started to lose the joy in it. So for me, I started looking back at, all the campaigns and the work that I'd done and, which ones were the most successful and which ones were the most meaningful to me personally. And what I uncovered was that all of those campaigns actually had one common ingredient, which was tapping into values, those core desires and motivations, and really making that human and personal connection. So at that time, there really wasn't any way to connect, the psychology around values and emotions to marketing. So I decided, okay, well, if I'm going to, give myself meaning and and really figure out what my purpose and meaning is, I need to dig deeper into this subject. So I contacted San Francisco State University. I had them help me build out this framework of understanding values and measuring values and using all this research. And then I transformed my whole agency into the world's first values marketing agency. So for me, it was like this huge risk and, following my passion, but it ended up in a, successful exit for me. So that was really, I think, the pivotal moment when I realized I have to uncover what my, my values and my purpose and meaning is. And I think that's kind of a journey that we all have to go on. And I've created some tools that kind of help other people do that. So for me, that was really the moment.
So where do you feel success became like your performance standard? Where did you choose success? Young girl, college age? Where did it happen?
I think Gosh, I think it's in some part of me. I think it's kind of inherent in who you are, and kind of there's not a choice. Is there a choice? For me, I moved out of my house when I was 15. I've gone through a lot of ups and downs, and there really wasn't another choice. I just, I knew that, for me, that I craved that feeling. And again, it's really a feeling, and I wanted to feel successful. And so, for me, I think from a very early age, I always, longed for that feeling of meaning, and that feeling of, just being connected, and of, having that sense of purpose. So for me, I feel like I've chosen that kind of from day one, but, along with that comes a lot of highs and lows, and, success is always winning. And I think that's really kind of a lot of the hard lessons that I've had to learn. Is a lot of the best times in my life, I didn't feel really successful, but I learned a lot.
Oh, I can relate. I can relate for sure. I guess, when you're brought up in a household or in a school or in around people that success is their performance standard, it's just natural. Do you think that it was parents, friends, grandparents? Where do you think it rubbed off from for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think I was brought up in a house where I was told anything was possible. I could be an astronaut, I could be, so there wasn't as much of a standard of you've got to get, straight A's and you've got to do this, but as much as this feeling of empowerment around, you can be, success is whatever you want it to be, and you can be anything that you want to be. And so I feel very fortunate to have had that, that feeling and that opportunity of just kind of, giving me that freedom to be able to pursue, my success. And I think I went down a lot of different paths to ultimately find that. But for me, I definitely do think growing up with this feeling of, limitlessness really has impacted my kind of feeling around and my understanding of what success is.
Love it. Is there a Sarah Hardwick ingredients list for success, or a formula for success?
Yeah, giving a shit. Honestly, I mean, you have to care about what you do, and you have to actually, believe. And so I think when you care, when there's a resonance between your purpose and your mission and what needs to be done, that's what it is. So if you don't care about what you do, no one else is going to either. And you're not going to have that feeling of success. So I think for me, it's kind of working in my genius zone, doing what I love, turning down opportunities that aren't right for me, and really following my instincts around really caring what I do and the types of work I do, the types of customers I take on, and making some of those hard decisions, and really making sure that I really believe in this. And if I don't really believe in it, no one else is. So for me, it's actually kind of that formula is really, caring.
I love that way of looking at it. One thing you said there, though, I want to delve into turning down opportunities. Tell me more about that.
I mean, I'm actually, I've had that situation so many times as I've launched this new company, The Crowd, because my mission is to work with companies that are changing the world. And so I've had some companies that said, hey, help me out. And, I want to do this and this and that. But I've had to take a hard look at, is this something that I really think is going to change the world? Do I believe in this? And, I'm a scrappy startup. And so I need to, bring in revenue, of course, but I've had to make some hard decisions where I know, going down this path, it's not necessarily, it may bring in revenue, but it's not necessarily going to be aligned with my meaning and purpose. And so those, I think, are some of the hardest things, because there's this natural pull between wanting to have financial independence and freedom. And so wanting kind of to take those revenue opportunities, but also for me, I want to spend time with my family. I want to also prioritize other things. And so I think there's always kind of this tug of war that we feel as entrepreneurs, where we have to make these hard decisions. And I think, that's kind of, it happens all the time. And sometimes it's brutal, but for me, in the end, it always works out. And I always feel, I'm always thankful. And I always feel that that's the right decision. But it's hard. You really have to trust your instincts. And sometimes it doesn't make financial sense. But I always feel like there's something better that's right down the line. So when that situation do happen.
So hang on, the trusting your instincts thing, what's your way of knowing, because a lot of people go, you got to trust your gut. But how do you do that? How do you ponder on it? Do you do it? What's your methodology of saying, yep, that's the right way?
Yeah. Well, I think, first creating space. And that's something that's really hard for me, because I've got a million things going on. So I think, meditating, I think you have to kind of for me, I have to create a connection, with the more spiritual side. And that's where I kind of feel like intuitively, and it's like it is that feeling in your gut. But for me, when I'm overwhelmed with lots of busy work and all these things, and I just haven't given myself like some time to really, create that space to look into my heart and soul and think about, what that looks like, I think it's more challenging. And so for me, I think it's, yes, it is, connecting and, mulling it over and pondering it, but it's like creating that space. It isn't just like a binary thing. It's really creating the space to kind of have open, free thinking and leaving that open for a little bit to kind of let the intuition creep in.
So if you look back, you've not had only successes, you've had mistakes and failures and corrections along the way. What's your theory on the relationship between success and failure?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that came to my mind when I was kind of thinking about this question was one of my favorite quotes by Khalil Gibran. It's, "The more sorrow carves out of your heart, the more room there is for joy." And so I feel like when you experience these failures, the hardest step I've ever gone through, it makes the success and the feeling of success even greater and even more powerful. And so for me, like until you really go through it, you kind of don't know what you're capable of. And I think, it really teaches you to appreciate, those highs and those moments. And it also really, kind of gives you that feeling of resiliency and confidence to take risks because, you're strong enough to get through whatever that is. So for me, it's like that, the harder it is, the bigger the failure, the more amazing and powerful that joy can be.
Yeah, I want to discuss that for a little bit because I've never really thought of it that way, that when you have the failures, it gives you the confidence to take risks. Teach me more about that. I love that philosophy.
Yeah, I'll just give you, I have a million examples of this, but I can just, one random example is I can remember when one time I, was kind of first starting off in my career and I had this chance to give a speech in front of 500 CEOs. And here was my big chance and I was so nervous and, going up there and I got out there and I thought to myself, I'm going to tell a joke because I'll just lighten it up. Well, I actually told the punchline of the joke before the actual joke because I was so nervous. And, so I went out there and I just froze and I stood there and I looked at the audience and they looked at me and they were all looking kind of confused. And, so I think it's like, for me, I got through that and I laughed it off and I kind of, I made it work. And then I'm not afraid to go up and give big talks. And I know that like, if I screw up or mess up or things happen, I can still be powerful and I can still, kind of keep the audience and still be successful. So, that's just a small example, but I think, if you didn't go out there, then you would never know what you're capable of. So for me now, I know that even if I fail, it's not the end of the world. And I can remember telling my dad, you'll never believe what I did. Oh my gosh. And he said, Sarah, it's just a blip. He said, you're going to look back at this and it's just going to be a little blip. And you know what? He was right. I don't even remember that. And so I think when you start to look at, failure like that, oh, it's just a little blip. And I'll do it. I could do anything. And I know that even if I'm not successful, I still am a success.
I love that. When I started ActionCOACH, there was no such thing as a business coaching company. When you took Zenzi down the road of values-driven marketing, no such thing. You weren't just creating a business, you were creating an entire profession, an entire industry. What do you think it is that you got to focus on when you're creating something that no one really understands or knows about?
Yeah, and that's hard. And that's where, it's a lot of, I think, branding, positioning. I think it's really doing a lot of your research. And so for me, I needed to understand, what do people think about values? And I realized they don't know what values are. They think values, they think family values or political values. And so I think number one, it's really doing the research and thinking about when you're creating something new, what do people think? What do people know? What is that education level? And then it's really crafting your message and your positioning around what that value proposition is. So for me, I had to say, okay, you heard of demographics. Well, these are psychographics, and psychographics are values. And then you have to say, oh, but we're used to, as marketers, targeting people based on their age and their income. But have you ever thought about targeting purpose seekers or freedom seekers? We're not all the same. And so for me, it's really about kind of doing the research initially to understand and not just kind of throw it all out there and see what sticks. and then doubling down on it. So message, strong, powerful, consistent message, and not deviating from that. And so for me, that was really kind of an important strategy in bringing that education to clients and to the world, to the marketing world.
Yeah. For us, I'll use our company as example with ActionCOACH. Well, we've had a vision, a mission, and our 14 points of culture and lived by it very strong. We've recruited to it. We've done all it. How else does values become a part of your brand or your market or your marketing out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, well, I think if you think about it like the 80-20 rule, the customers that are going to be the most passionate about your company, who will be your raving fans, who will be your advocates, your ambassadors, they're going to be the ones who are most aligned with your values. So think about your website. First off, what are your company values? And are they articulated clearly on your website? Are you telling stories about your values? If your values, one of your core values is freedom, are you out there talking about calling all trailblazers, calling all risk takers, calling all, mavericks? And so the thing about values is they're polarizing. And so what is going to attract one customer is going to turn off the other. And so when you think about who is that ideal top customer, using messaging and words and images that are going to appeal to that customer based on their values, even if it's polarizing, is how you kind of bring that to market. So you can't be afraid to turn people off. You really have to double down on that ideal profile and really focus in on kind of bringing those values to life across your whole company.
Yeah, when I started doing some reading and studying of all your work, it really intrigued me that it's almost like niching based on the values or niching based on the as you use it, the psychographics. Is that something that people are used to yet even, or is it still something people are learning to be the new way or the new thinking, even though you've been doing it for 20, 30, 20 something years? Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're still getting there. I think that the idea of values seems a little fluffy to some people. The truth is there's 40 years of psychology backing this up. 3/4 of our decision making is based on emotional factors, not rational factors. And so I think kind of talking about some of the statistics and things like that, definitely helps. But I think the biggest way to show people that this works is actually implementing it in campaigns. And so building a tribe around values, building a community, building a network, building a fan base, nurturing a group of people who are your supporters who share those values. I think that's really the best way to kind of say, hey, does this work? Well, let me give you some examples. And so that's where I bring this these approach and this theory to all of the different companies that I work with, and that's really how I think you show what the power is of that values-based approach.
I'd love it, Sarah, if you could give us a concrete example that people can sort of hang their hat on and go, oh, that makes sense. I now see how that works.
Sure. Well, I'll give you an example. So after I sold my agency, Zenzi, I came on board as the chief marketing officer of Aptera Motors. And they're an EV company. They were just a startup. And at the time, it was right after COVID, and we were looking to raise money, and it was very hard. The climate financially was very hard to raise money at the time. And so we started a crowdfunding campaign. And I think our goal was to raise like $200,000 or something. And we ended up raising, just initially over $5 million. And then we went on over the next 3 years to raise, over $140 million through crowdfunding. And the way that I did that was, number one, uncovering the values of the community. So I knew we had something magic, right? I knew that there was something, how would we overshoot our goal? So much, like, what is this passionate and driving base behind us? And I had to uncover the values. And so, I thought, well, hey, it's an EV company. It's probably about the environment, and it's about purpose, and it's about giving back and saving the planet. But what I didn't realize, and what we kind of uncovered, was there's also this kind of this persona that's all about freedom and disrupting and first to market and early adopters. And so with those insights, I was able to craft messages and really speak to these two groups and build this community around what they really cared about, and using those values insights. So we built an ambassador program, and we had 800 ambassadors all across the world. And these people, they are from high schoolers all the way up to, centenarians, people who are 100 years old. And they didn't have common demographics. They all had a shared set of values. And so by uncovering and tapping into those values and then speaking to those, building a community around that, that's how we were able to, create $1.5 billion of orders and 19,000 investors and raise 140 million, because we really focused in on that idea of values-based marketing.
Well, hey there, and thanks for listening. I've noticed that 78% of you are brand new, which means you haven't hit the subscribe button yet. By subscribing, you help us bring on even better guests, better quality content, and serve you better with even more podcasts. So please hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. It makes a huge difference. If you support us, we're going to support your success and help you achieve big success together. Love it. I love it. Now, I'm going to get to the crowdfunding stuff in a minute because I think that's really, really interesting. But I want to start with the brand ambassadors. 800 brand ambassadors. Take me back to how did the idea happen and what are the main keys to execution, I guess?
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, so
yeah, it's a big subject. I know.
Yeah, no, it's and it's actually, it's funny because it's one of those things where it wasn't like a part of my strategic plan necessarily, as much as it was just by necessity. And so, when I started there, I was the only marketing person, and I was answering all of the info at, emails and all of those emails. And it started to get overwhelming as the movement started to grow. And so I just put out an email, and I thought, well, there's got to be some people who might want to help out, and help, because I'm just so busy and I'm only one person, and someone's got to, help. And we're getting here thousands of comments on social media. And I just started to feel overwhelmed. So I put out an email and said, hey, if anyone's interested in being, an ambassador for the brand, let me know. And at that point, I thought, maybe I'd get like a handful of people. And I immediately started to get hundreds of emails back. So I thought, oh my gosh, I have to figure out how to, systematize this. So I created an application, where they could say why they wanted to be an ambassador and what were their superpowers. Oh, some wanted to help with lobbying and legislation and talk to their congressman. Some wanted to go to EV events and be, represent the brand there, hand out stickers. Some wanted to be on social media. And in fact, one decided, they said, well, why aren't we on Reddit? And I said, I don't have the time to, moderate a Reddit channel. And he said, cool, well, I'll do that. And so what I ended up doing is thinking about, what are the key initiatives happening in marketing and around the company where I needed support. And then I mobilized these ambassadors behind these key initiatives. So communications and marketing, grassroots advocacy, legislation, events, and really mobilize them behind that. And then it's nice because then it kind of just starts, it has a life of its own. And so then, what's cool about this is these are volunteers, right? These are just people who care about your brand. So you have to really think about what are they going to get out of it. So for these ambassadors, we started to do these quarterly webinars, and they got to ask our CEOs questions, and they got first access and early access to information. They got to see cool behind the scenes images. And for them, that was everything. Being able to, be on the inside, we gave them business cards that said ambassador. And that was like their favorite thing, here. And so it was really just this idea of being on the inside and being exclusive. And so that's kind of how it all started to take life. And then it grew from there.
Yeah. So what, I assume then you have to build tools and give them things to make it easier for them to do the job?
That's right. Yeah. So you kind of figure out where you want your community to live, and then you give them, for example, here's an email. If you know any reporters or editors, here's a draft email pitch you can send out. Here's a social media post. Here are images. And, so you would create kind of almost like a library, of content and assets and things like that they can actually share. And then when you have big announcements and things that come out, you give them a heads up in advance, and then you give them exactly what you want them to share. So then you've got 800 people out there, commenting. We also, I think one thing is it's like the transparency. And so we put together an FAQ for them, where when they're out there on, Facebook or Instagram or wherever they are, Reddit, and they see someone has a question and it hasn't been answered or they know it was, incorrect, they could go to the FAQ, find the right answer, and they would comment back. And so what started to happen was, before I even got a chance to go, or my team even had a chance to go and try to respond back, someone else, an ambassador, had already done that. And so you have to give them the tool set and give them the information and plan it out in advance. And then eventually we had like an ambassador program manager. When the program gets so big, then you do maybe have to have a person who can kind of manage it, and because they've all got ideas, and you want to be able to take those ideas, and some of those ideas are the best that we ever came up with, and so you have to have someone to kind of listen, and it really is like a nurturing process. That there is a lot that goes into it, but the return for us, I mean, it's the reason why the company was so successful, was having this network. It's the heart and soul, and I think that's what a lot of people forget.
I think it's sort of a natural progression. Values, raving fans, ambassadors. It's like that natural progression. But you built also, I think it was like you said, 1,900 people invested through the crowdfunding there.
And 19,000.
19,000, dang. So 19,000 people, 140 million. All right, let's take it to the beginning of the crowdfunding thing, because I know that's a big part of what you do today with Crowd. Where did you start the idea to do crowdfunding, and how did it get its origins, I guess, for a car company?
Yeah, I mean, well, so I think first off, just I think people, when you think of crowdfunding, there's a lot of different types of crowdfunding. So a lot of times people think like Kickstarter. So there's rewards-based crowdfunding like Kickstarter, where you're actually producing a product, right? Where you give them, they're investing and they're getting XYZ product that you're producing for them. Then there's equity-based crowdfunding. And so that's when you're actually giving shares in your company in exchange for investment. So in this case, you're really making a promise and kind of setting the landscape of the future vision of the company and creating a reason for people to believe. So in the past, so this is equity crowdfunding is relatively new. In the past, really only VCs and private equity firms and accredited investors really could become owners of companies in this way. And so over the past 10 years, the landscape has changed. And with new rules and regulations, now anyone can have a voice. So you or me or anyone who wants to say, I believe in this company, can actually invest. You could invest $500, you can invest 500,000. But what it does is it allows, the community to have a say in what comes to market. So no longer do you have to be beholden, or do you have to kind of wait and hope and pray that you get this funding that's going to come in from the kind of these big firms. You can say, hey, I believe in this so much, and I have a raving fan base. We're just going to do this ourselves. And so that was kind of how it happened with Aptera, where in the beginning it was just hard to get that money just because of the timing with COVID. And so that was kind of how it emerged, at least. And then I can tell you a little more about kind of the path from there.
Yeah, I'd love to know what are sort of the core success factors of a crowdfunding campaign. Like, what makes it a success?
Yeah, well, so number one, it's the community. And so that's kind of where we're talking about if you don't have an engaged community, if people don't care, and this kind of goes back to the success, right? If they don't care, if you don't care and they don't care, they're not going to want to be a part of your company, because you're basically giving them a chance to be an owner of your company. And so a lot of times in companies that have been coming, or that I've been talking to, they don't have a community yet. And I think that makes it a little bit harder, because you really do need to have a community, or at least have kind of the startings of this passionate group to be able to nurture that and get that to grow. So I think number one, a strong community that's aligned with values is really important in cultivating that community where they really share your vision and empowering them. And then I think number two, most important thing successful is just the transparency. And so especially in a startup, we're going to go through ups and downs, and it's hard because part of you doesn't want to tell everyone everything, right? You only want to tell them the good things that are happening. And when you are, managing a crowdfunding campaign, it's a journey, and you're bringing them along on this journey. And part of the journey is a transparency that there are ups and downs. And so, if they're, oh gosh, we had a hold up on this, or we're doing this. And so I think part of it is really being open and being honest and accessible, and just sharing the good and the bad with your community. And I think that really builds a level of trust. And I think then, you'll see people who come and invest a little bit, and they'll watch your journey, and maybe it didn't progress as quickly as you thought it would be, but they know that they've seen what you've been doing, and they see the work, how hard you've been working, and you've been direct with them, and they'll reinvest and maybe invest more. So I think that kind of authentic storytelling and that transparency is like a good number 2. And then number 3 is you got to leverage all the data and optimize your ad spend and your targeting. So for Aptera, for example, we raised $140 million, and we spent probably an average of, I'd say, 5% on advertising to raise that. But you have to really double down. You have to really, target based on values. You have to monitor every channel. You have to insist on tracking those conversions. And so, you can definitely drive predictable equity crowdfunding investment through advertising. And I think it's really using all the data at your disposal and really creating very targeted ad campaigns to help to support that. So that's another key ingredient as well.
Got it. I one time watched a bunch of different crowdfunding videos, and I thought some people put almost no effort into the video that goes with their crowdfunding, and some people put a ton of effort into it and do great. And yet I saw some with almost no effort raising a lot of money and some with a ton of effort not raising a lot of money. Is there a correlation between the marketing pieces and the success, or do you think it's more the values that seem to do that?
I think both. I think you have to have values alignment first and foremost. And if you don't have that, there's, you don't have a community. And then I think it is, mobilizing your community, putting the gas on the marketing, really focusing in on that. So I do think that you have to have both. And I think when you see those kind of campaigns, it's like the one that's kind of taking off with, without so much work probably has a very passionate base of community behind it that's really supporting it and driving it. And, maybe others not so much, or they're still trying to build their community, as they're growing. And I think, using crowdfunding to test whether a product's going to work or not, sometimes that can be tough. So I think you really kind of have to have done your homework, know your audience, know the values, start to build the community, and then jump into a crowdfunding campaign in order to really ensure the success.
Dang, I could spend days chatting about this one. Sarah, let me, though, dive to my final question I always ask. What's the best advice or best quote that you ever got on the subject of success?
Yeah, so I love this quote from Zig Ziglar. If you can give enough people what they want, you can have everything you want. So that's one of my favorites, because I think for me, it's understanding what do people really want and then being able to give them what,
I love it. I remember I got to share the stage with Zig 20-something years ago back in Sydney, Australia, and the guy is absolute legend. I love that quote too. Sarah Hardwick, thank you so much for your time. Hey, this is the Big Success Podcast. Hit the show notes, follow, study, learn everything Sarah teaches. You got it here, and we'll be back next week with more of your success.
You've been listening to the Big Success Podcast with the #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars. To learn more about how to achieve business and personal success, as well as how to level up or listen to past episodes, visit www.bradsugars.com.